or the Ministry of Education to reduce barriers for young people getting STEM education, getting the credentials to become a physician or a healthcare giver? Would you have any specific recommendations? And I'm wondering, quite frankly, do you see that there are still a number of barriers in existence, principally on racism, which prevent young people, young Indigenous people in this country getting the kind of education you had? You're a role model. You've been through it, and I'm sure you have some ideas or recommendations on how to make it better and more facilitating for inclusion of Indigenous people in healthcare provision.
Mm-hmm. So I can speak from my experience first. So I actually, after graduating high school, I thought I was going to be an event planner. Then I was a paramedic for a while, and then I was a respiratory therapist for a while. So I had multiple roles prior to going into medicine. And during that, one of the barriers was the requirements to get into medical school, having a specific GPA, doing the MCAT exam, which the MCAT exam is 8 hours. It's only provided in English. Therefore, that completely cuts out Indigenous people where their first language is not English. So I applied to Northern Ontario School of Medicine because they don't require the MCAT, and they had a specific Indigenous pathway where they look at you as a whole person, what your whole package, rather than what you just look like on paper and what your scores are. So I think that's been a huge shift in a lot of different medical schools, and even reaching nursing schools and social work and physiotherapy, that we're starting to see these Indigenous pathways that look at you as a whole person. Many Indigenous youth aren't just doing school, they're also working because they have to take care of their siblings or they have to provide for their family. And so that doesn't allow them to study 4 hours a day for this MCAT. That is also a huge financial barrier as well. So I think continuing to support schools in developing these Indigenous pathways are crucial. And then also supporting different universities that, okay, once you've recruited Indigenous students, how do you then support them? How do you support if they need to continue working that part-time job? How do you support them culturally by having cultural events on campus and having a safe place where they can go and talk with different mentors and feel safe to study? So I think all of those things and to be able to get more people into healthcare, we have to start working upstream, I guess, of recruiting Indigenous youth and then supporting them through their educational goals. So that's where I see things moving, and it is good. I've seen a lot of shift just recently, specifically at Dalhousie University, where I do my family medicine residency.
I wonder, Dr. Beals, if you could comment on this idea. I'm a firm believer in the power of education, and I think it behooves all Canadian students to learn about the treaties and the treaty relationship. And I know that in Saskatchewan, there was developed a set of resources from grades K to 12 that answer the question, what are the meaning of the treaties in a modern context? And also that is a very strong program in Manitoba. And I believe in Nova Scotia, the Ministry of Education has at least started on that idea. But I wonder if you would support the concept that it's important for all Canadians, especially in reconciliation, to understand some of the basic relationships that are contained in the treaties and how those might be applied in a modern context.
Yeah, I think, as you said, education is power. And I think it's been within the last couple of years that different schools have adopted a actual curriculum, Indigenous curriculum, and about the treaties and historical context for Indigenous people. So I think continuing to support that. I said I knew I was Mi'kmaq, but I didn't know half what I know now, or even a quarter. And and it was never taught in school. I'm not even sure we spoke about Indigenous people in our history classes in school. So adding that to curriculum now it has to happen.
Thank you. Any other questions from the floor, senators? Okay, the time for this panel is now complete, and I wish to thank Dr. Beals for meeting with us today. And we will now suspend the meeting briefly to allow us to switch the panel. I'd like to introduce our next witness, Taylor Ben Sakoza, a proud Dene woman from the Fort Nelson and Prophet River First Nations in British Columbia Treaty 8 territory. Taylor will provide opening remarks of up to 10 minutes, followed by a question and answer session with committee members. I now invite Taylor to give opening remarks.
Is this on? Yeah, with the light. Thank you. Nega Dagondi Sadzikla, Taylor Baintakoza Ote. Good afternoon, senators. My name is Taylor Baintakoza. I'm Dene. I come from the Fort Nelson and Prophet River First Nations. My communities are located in northeastern BC and are signatories to Treaty Number 8. I am a second-generation intergenerational survivor. My mom didn't attend residential school, but my dad attended day school. My aunties and uncles attended the Lower Post Indian Residential School in northern BC. I'm currently serving as the elected female youth representative for the British Columbia Assembly First Nations, and over the last year I served as co-chair of the APTN National Youth Council. And it's truly is an honor and a privilege to be speaking to you today as part of the Voices of Indigenous Youth Leaders. And I really do say it's a privilege because I know many of my peers back home can only dream of having this opportunity. So I really thank you. I honestly don't really have much prepared on other than some, initial ideas of my thoughts around reconciliation, because I think for myself, reconciliation is such a buzzword that I really try not to use. It isn't something that resonates with me, or it's just, I think when I think about reconciliation, I think about relationships, and I think about, how do I best show up every day to represent myself, my community, and my nation. And so as I was sitting last night trying to figure out what I wanted to share today, I think I came to the conclusion that reconciliation is very much a personal journey as much as it is a collective. And so I'd like to share a little bit of reflections that that came to me as I was sitting with that. So I mentioned I come from northern BC. My community's, to give you some context, my community is located about an hour south of the Northwest Territories border and an hour west of the Alberta border. So if you could point make a point right in the northeast corner. That's where my territory is. And my parents' territories overlap, so the only place I could ever call home is in that part of Turtle Island. And I was thinking about the teachings that were passed down to me from my grandparents and my parents, and how that kind of forms my definition or the way I view reconciliation. And my grandfather, George Bain, was a big advocate for our treaty that our people signed on to with the Crown, and in our case it's treaty number 8. And I was actually having a conversation with one of my colleagues, Jam. I hope it's okay if I share our conversation, but we were talking about what does that mean to us as young people, and he shared that reconciliation implies that there was good relations to start with, and when I think about what my grandfather had shared my entire life about our treaty, and we need to exercise our treaty rights or they're going to take them away, and we need to protect the treaty at all costs. When my people signed into Treaty 8 as a way of an adhesion in 1910, my people had good intentions. They believed that the Crown and this state of Canada was going to uphold their side. And so when I think about reconciliation, I think about the treaty relations that still exist today. Those treaties are still binding today. And, how am I as a young person making sure that, our treaties are honored, and how is that playing into this narrative of reconciliation in this country? As I was also sitting and reflecting, I also had to think about my grandmother. She very much influenced the way I view my relations with non-Indigenous settlers to our land. And, my grandma was born in 1930, and, I can only imagine what life was like for her back then as an Indigenous person, but as an Indigenous woman nonetheless. And, she, 10 out of her 16 children went to residential school. As I mentioned, my aunties and uncles went to lower post, and she would share stories of her sitting on the riverbank just crying for days after RCMP came on their boat and took them away, and not being able to vote until 1960, and all these things that were put against her to keep her down, to keep her inferior to the rest of society really breaks my heart. But my grandma was the kindest person you would ever meet. She was full of love and kindness, and she always approached her work and her relations with people was always grounded in that, that hope that one day that the other side would uphold their part of what they were, agreed to. And so I think about, the teachings that I have of treaty and showing up with kindness and love, but still being stern to who I am as a Dene, a woman, and where I come from. And so, yeah, reconciliation. It's very, very much a buzzword that I think, I think it's at this point lip service, and it's lacking very intangible outcomes and actions. And as a young person, I'm 26 years old, and as I'm reflecting last night, the time change really got to me. But I was, thinking about what my purpose was here today and also in this world. And I truly believe that, I have the power and the privilege, and again, I'll keep saying privilege because I feel very privileged to be here today to continue to make space for other young people, to follow suit if they so wish, or just to feel empowered that they can do anything that they set their mind to. And I think I was also having a hard time thinking about what to share on reconciliation because earlier this year, I was the official youth representative that went with the First Nations delegation to the Vatican. I had about 8 minutes to share with Pope Francis what I thought as a young person who's an intergenerational survivor, whose family survived residential schools, who has hope in the future, what I thought the Catholic Church could do better. And I traveled all the way to the Vatican over the Atlantic Ocean. And I'm 3,000 kilometers away from home right now. I don't even know what the math is to put me over there, but it was far. I had to travel days to get there because I believe in this process of reconciliation. I believe that one day that, people in these institutions are going to do what's right. And, you know, upon returning home, I thought I was going to feel a little bit more hopeful. And I think that sense of hope is still there, but I think it's a little bit hindered of this criticism and this little bit more of awareness of what it's like to actually be in these spaces. And so when I was trying to just like, what reconciliation, how do I see this playing out? I think I should applaud all of you for, you know, seeing the power and having young people speak today. And every year, I know you guys have been holding this since like 2016. And, you know, being at the AFN, going to the Vatican, I went to the UN in April in New York City, went to the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Peoples. And I'm always bringing this message that young people need to be at this table. You know, it's the future that you're all like fighting for is a future we're going to inherit, and like but we need to be part of that process because we're inherent and are going to like embrace that future, but it's also like our future that we're fighting for as well. So I just applaud you that, you know, you recognize the importance of us being here, because in many spaces that hasn't been the case. And even going to the Vatican, I had to go to 4 meetings before they were finally like, okay, you can come. Like, it wasn't even me. It was a youth. I was advocating, myself and my co-chair at the time were advocating for a youth. It was just that her and I were elected to, you know, to represent First Nations youth. So we went. But I hope, and I think I'll like end off on trying to think of like how, you know, what do I want to leave here today? And I think that I have 10 nieces and nephews back home. They all look up to me. And I hope that, you know, they like by the time they're in their early 20s and they're, you know, eager to like have their voice, or that they aren't fighting for the same things that we're here discussing, that my colleagues will be here, that will be discussing after me. And I also should mention that part of my work that I always like to bring in is this idea of life promotion. And I don't know if anyone knows the term of life promotion, but it's this concept that's grounded in Indigenous culture and values that centers life in what is most commonly known as suicide prevention. And I think what makes me so passionate about this is like I'm advocating here for more youth to be involved, but our youth have to be here then to be involved. They have to be able to, you know, be able to live a life that they feel is that they're worth living, and that, you know, that they can see themselves here one day. And so I think I would regret not mentioning that if I can encourage all of you to center life and all the work that you do, whether it's here or in your personal lives, that's what I would like to see as a young person. Because like I said, reconciliation is a personal journey just as much as it is a collective. And so I encourage all of you to reflect on what that means to you. But with that, Masti Cho, thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for your message, Taylor. We'll now begin the question and answer portion of the meeting, and I'll turn it to Senator Brasso.
Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here, and thank all of you for being with us today. You mentioned the issue of intergenerational trauma. And when we're talking about reconciliation, presumably when we look at the word reconciliation, it kind of means that either something or somebody was broken. And we all know that it is the Indigenous peoples of Canada who were broken with the residential school system. And so, you know, back in the 90s, there was the government. You know, governments are very good at having key phrases, key words. Back in those 90s, it was gathering strength. You know, then you had other themes, and now we now have truth and reconciliation. And you mentioned that you're a second generation survivor, and for many years we didn't know the truth, and many people didn't want to believe the truth about residential schools, but now we know. And one of the things that I've been working with and working on is ensuring that people like you are not forgotten in this, because there's somebody at fault, and you inherited, this life because of past mistakes by the federal government, the government of Canada. And so you believe that reconciliation is in fact possible? And I ask this because having been broken myself at one point, it takes a lot of hard work and it takes a lot of patience to get healthier, to get better. And so I ask if you believe it's possible, because before the government wants to conclude to reconciliation phase, I believe there's a reparation phase that needs to be done. And what do you believe? What do you think about that?
Yeah. Do I think reconciliation is possible? I mean, I wouldn't be here if I didn't think it was. I'm still very critical of it. I'm trying to, I could write a list of what I think needs to happen before, reconciliation. And I definitely don't think it's a check mark. We talk about reconciliation being a process, being a journey. And yeah, and I'm wearing my shirt that says land back. That's one thing that's sticking out is I think I believe reconciliation is possible when my people are when our land is returned to us, when I can speak my language, when my nieces and nephews can speak my language, when when this whole institution is all Indigenous, maybe that's when I'll believe that they're actually listening and they actually believe in what we're saying, and that we have value as Indigenous people. So yeah, I hope it's achieved in my lifetime. I guess maybe that's what I'll end on with, because I am still hopeful, and that yeah.
So perhaps just a quick follow-up, with respect to Indigenous youth who are caught in the crosshairs of intergenerational trauma, what do you think those youth and those young people would need today in order to give them hope for the future, and not having you guys here in 20 years and talking about the same things again over and over again?
Yeah.
So what is needed now to create that hope for the future once and for all?
I'm excited for you to hear from my colleagues. I know one of the issues that's going to be brought up is child welfare. Stop taking our kids. Replace the Indian Act with something that's actually going to benefit us as Indigenous people and the future generations. It's I have issues on here. Climate change, UNDRIP, mental health are kind of the things. If we can implement UNDRIP in a good way, then we can I think we'll have the autonomy then to decide for ourselves what that looks like. Because I think for each nation and each person that might look a little different. And so get out of the way is what I would say. And that's what we need is as young people is we know what we need. We just need people to listen and the resources to do it. So give it to us. I don't know. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for that answer, Taylor. And I have a question for you. If you could reach out to non-Indigenous people and encourage them to do one thing on September 30th, what would that be?
Yeah. Definitely support, wherever you are in this country, support your local nations that are in your area, support their events. And I wish I could say reflection is enough. I wish people all had the opportunity to just sit somewhere quiet and reflect on truly what, September 30th means to this country. And, as we come up on the 1 year of this day being created, I think there's so much opportunity to, make this worthwhile and worth people's time, and to what Dr. Beals was saying before me, in her example of Remembrance Day, it's just ingrained in society that at 11 o'clock you take a moment of silence. How can we create that same effect on September 30th? I think is we should be doing it now. We should be figuring what that is, because, as the years go on, September 30th is going to mean something to this country. And I unfortunately don't see it yet for a number of reasons. But I think we're just such in a crucial stage right now to really make that impact. So
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Taylor. Senator Renaud?
Thank you, Senator Francis. I'm glad you raised the issue of the good intentions of the treaty parties at the time, and I can say that Alexander Morse, the treaty commissioner in Treaty 4 and 6, did have good intentions, and he was appalled when the government of Canada failed to follow the treaties, the written part of the treaties, just so you know. So I commend you for that. And I also commend you for being a passionate, articulate youth leader. I hope you can fuel that passion. And I just point out this idea. Your elders have talked to you about the treaties and how the treaties are core. The treaties are part of the Canadian Constitution, the supreme law of the land. They have to be honored, but they haven't been so far. And so I'm encouraging you to follow the advice of your elders and really focus on the treaties and the treaty relationship in a modern context, because Indigenous people haven't found their rightful place in the Canadian state. One reason is the treaties haven't been implemented according to the spirit and intent of treaties. So you're right about treaties. Treaties are a core, and they are a rallying point for you and other youth leaders to really focus on in the future. And reconciliation will occur if those treaties are implemented according to the spirit and intent of treaties. So I commend you for that, and I just, you give me hope when a leader like you comes before this group and talks about that and focuses on that treaty relationship in a future. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Quat?
And thank you to our guest, Taylor. Really appreciated your intervention and your challenge to us about getting out of the way, about implementing UNDRIP, about paying attention to climate change, and creating, as you said, much more space at the table for Indigenous people, their rightful place, to take their rightful place. So I really appreciated everything you had to say. We're listening. You mentioned also your visit to the Vatican and the 8 minutes that you had speaking your truth, the truth of your people to the Pope. I'm wondering if you would be willing to share any of the key messages that you shared at that moment with us, as they may be relevant to our conversation on reconciliation here.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for the question. And sorry, I tried not to cry earlier to your the previous senator. Oh yeah, thank you. And yeah. I mean, both of you, just everything, even your question you posed us earlier. Like when you say you're listening, I feel that. So thank you for that. Yeah. When I was drafting, and I actually changed my speaking notes to Pope Francis the night before, because we did the Vatican tour of the museum the day before we went in to see him. And again, like, I think there's so many moments that kind of changed my perception of, like, or not my perception, but just like my thoughts around reconciliation. And so I made sure to add in there about like the reparations of like the artifacts that were stolen from our people here in Canada, and like returning those in a really in a way that follows our protocols was something that I asked of him. I talked a lot about the doctrine of discovery. I know that was a point mentioned by a few of the other leaders that were in the room that day, but I felt as a young person, like I'm going to be here for another 80 years, hopefully. And so I recognize my power in being able to advocate for like that papal bull to be rescinded, especially with the new king. I'm ready. Like, and when I say like being in these spaces, I hope that other young people feel empowered to, to be here as well. Leaving the Vatican, I was like, I truly believe, I'm going to go to Buckingham Palace and I'm going to like make sure that the king, the now king, knows, like, has an understanding of the treaty, and then within that, I feel like it's inevitable that the doctrine needs to be rescinded in order to fully embrace and have that treaty, and again, in my case, treaty number 8 honored. But all treaties in Canada, like, they're legally binding. It's just so crazy to me that we're still here talking about this issue. Anyway, yeah, and then of course I just shared with him, like, my story as an intergenerational survivor, making sure that our voices are included in these discussions, because I think we also have a part to play in the discussion around residential schools, but also reconciliation as a whole. Again, on the basis that, you know, this is also our future that we're wanting to, like, have a say in. And so, yeah, those are kind of the main topics that I covered.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Audette.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much.
Oh, je peux parler français. You have the...
I could speak in French. You do have the interpretation. Afterwards, in Inuit and French, my English is a little bit rusty. I want to thank you, Taylor. In Inuit, we say Tinishkunakin, which means until we see you again, according to our protocols.
I said you were awesome. You can read what I said for real, but thank you very much, Nashkamadan. And when you said that you have so much hope, this is what keeps me alive, the hope and the relationship with, like I told you at lunch, with amazing human beings. So I think you witnessed what I was saying with the other senators. And if the reconciliation, it is something sometimes that we don't feel it because it was imposed. It's not something natural, I would say, for me as an Inuit woman, but I'm willing to add something. My question to you, Taylor, knowing that our neighbors, the other chamber, the members of parliament, we see them passing by, every election. What can we tell them that I'm sure they have a responsibility. The federal government can say or can do or can walk with you on this, I guess. What can we bring as a message to them if there's a legislation or something? So we make sure that your voice is worth and powerful. Sorry for my rusted English, but...
Yeah, no, it was great. Yeah. House of Commons, Trudeau. I wish that they had a program like this over there. I think it's important to be here in the Senate, but I took part in Daughters of the Vote in 2019, and that experience was quite impactful on my life and wanting to be involved in politics. I wish that there was some program geared towards doing that for Indigenous people and like doing it in a way that is culturally sensitive and that the supports that that we require are there, and just just having it really catered and supportive of young people. I think would I don't know if that's legislation or just like a program suggestion or like something like that, but I think that's like my overall dream is to see that happen. And so if you could bring that forward, I would love that and would really appreciate it.
Thank you. We'll go to Senator Bovey for a final question, and then we'll wrap up.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm sorry I'm late. My plane had a flat tire.
Right.
I'll tell you. And I will read what you've said. I just want to say a thank you. I was very, very moved with what went on in the Vatican. And I do have one quick question, and it's about repatriation of First Nations Indigenous cultural treasures, those within Canada and those internationally back to Canada. And I know many museums and many of us have been working on this for a long time. I wonder if you have ideas that can make those repatriations faster?
Ooh. Yeah, I mean, the one thing in the conversations that we had while we were walking through the Vatican was, like as a group, we were talking about like how can we get these back, and if we did get them back, what does that look like? A lot of like, and I know I've learned so much about art, not so much. I learned a lot more than I did about artifacts. Like they have to be a certain temperature, they have to be in a room, the light can't be too bright. All these things is like my community doesn't have those infrastructure or ways to like preserve our artifacts. And so I think like that would be a really big help, is like having some sort of maybe funding available so that communities could engage if that's the way they want to go. I know, those artifacts, we believe that those pieces of art and pieces of our culture, those have a spirit. It isn't our way to go put them in a museum, but I would say if that's what the community wants to do, we should support them in that. And then also just, I think just having those dialogues, because the Vatican was telling us, because they have a setup of Indigenous Australian artifacts there, and they want to do that with us here in Turtle Island in what's now known as Canada. And so I think just like kickstarting those conversations, because they were like, that's like our grand idea. It's like, okay, well, let's chat more about it. So I think just starting the conversation, I think would make it a lot faster for one. And yeah, I think I want to say it's in the TRC as well. Like I think just pressuring, if that's something we bring to the House of Commons, that would be part of it as well. So I
will say there used to be a program that funded the Umista Center, which allowed for the return of the amazing, stunning materials that were taken from the potlatches, the coppers. It's amazing. So thank you. We'll see what we can do to get some of that returned.
Perfect.
Thank you for that, Senator Bovey. Okay, so the time for this panel is now complete, and I wish to thank Taylor for meeting with us today. We will now suspend the meeting briefly to allow us to switch panels. Now I would like to introduce our next witness, Gabrielle Fayette, a proud Métis woman whose family is from Fishing Lake Métis Settlement in Alberta. Gabrielle Fayette will provide opening remarks of up to 10 minutes, followed by a question and answer session with committee members. And I would now invite Gabrielle to provide opening remarks.
Tanse, Gabrielle Fan Nitsugason, Pakchahanse Utsinia, Ani Bojo, Gabrielle Fan Indigenous Cause, Pakchahanse and Donjaba, Mama Nene Nishnabe King and Donji, Makwando Dam, A7G and Donoki. So hi everyone, my name is Gabrielle Fayant, and as mentioned, I come from one of the 8 land-based recognized Métis settlements in Alberta. And so I'm going to share a little bit about my experience having to leave my community and my homelands and starting new, and kind of my journey with reconciliation. So I come from 3 generations of residential school, day school, convents, industrial schools, 60 scoop survivors. Even my cousins today are affected by child welfare. One of my cousins was actually the youngest person to pass away due to the opioid crisis. And so this colonization has never ended. The oppression has never ended. It just carried on. So to get into my remarks, I'm also the co-founder and helper to an Indigenous youth-led nonprofit organization called Assembly of 7 Generations, A7G for short. We work on the unceded and unsurrendered land of the Algonquin peoples, where we do our best to support local Indigenous youth and youth within our network, while also giving back to the host Algonquin nation when we can. I know from personal experiences what it is to feel isolated in an urban environment, to have no resources or support that made me feel safe or connected to my culture and community. This feeling, the culture shock, and the sense of disconnection of moving away from my family and homelands to Ottawa as a preteen amplified the struggles of adolescence and left me looking for ways to belong and survive. There were so many times I cheated death and overcame barriers that many of my peers did not. Part of my healing journey was to co-create A7G in 2012 and offer the community support to Indigenous youth that was missing for me and my peers. Although A7G is not a service provider, we have created a thriving, culturally rich community and a safe space to belong. And I'm super grateful that some youth from A7G had the strength and courage to come with me today and sit behind me. It feels really nice. We've created ethical guidelines on research, meaningfully documented the experiences of Indigenous youth in care, and amplified youth voices on land defense and stewardship. I am proud that many youth consider me an auntie, and I protect them with my life. Even as a youth, those of us selected as special advisors by Indigenous and Northern Affairs INAC Minister Carolyn Bennett in 2017 had a more direct experience with the disappointment and often dehumanizing outcomes of consultation than most. We resisted the tokenization most often imposed on Indigenous youth committees and councils, pushing to work on the implementation of TRC Call to Action 66, instead of forming an Indigenous Youth Council for the department. TRC 66 reads, "We call upon the federal government to establish multi-year funding for community-based youth organizations to deliver programs on reconciliation and establish a national network to share information and best practices." So I'm here to talk about restitution. I took my commitment to this work very seriously, and our work was done through ceremony and felt the support of many people who prayed for our success, knowing that it was grave importance. We also lost many young people that we started this work with and for. Implementing TRC 66 can be the difference of life and death for many youth. Just in the last 2 weeks, actually, one of the youth groups we work with in the north lost 3 young people just in a matter of days, and that's how important TRC 66 is. We also lost a a young boy. He was only 12 years old when we started this work, and we've lost many along the way. To form our plan, we heard from Indigenous youth from all over via a quantitative survey. We visited communities, and we also had a national gathering. The roadmap on the implementation of TRC Call to Action 66 was created and presented to the minister in 2018. Instead of empowering the youth who built this framework to move it forward, a large amount of money was earmarked for our purpose and diverted elsewhere in 2019. Co-opting our work effectively silenced the concerns we'd brought forward, and without continued support from Bennett's office, removed any power or impetus our youth delegation had in actioning TRC Call to Action 66. Like other Indigenous youth groups across the nation, we did not have the privilege to pause or stop after a defeat or setback. Groups like A7G are a lifeline for the youth that are constantly trying to survive poverty, institutionalization, housing crises, mental health crises, and the endemic of missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, Two-Spirit, and LGBTQIA+ people. These challenges are also the realities of those running these groups. Organizers face a cycle of poverty and insecurity due to the lack of consistent funding. They face displacement without spaces to organize and gather. And we face burnout from being a needed source for support for many. I don't have a full-time job to run A7G, but yet I have to answer calls, crisis calls at 4 a.m. Sometimes we're up all night making sure that young people are safe, and there's no support. There's nothing. We're the lifeline. These challenges are addressed in the plans A7G continued to build using the roadmap. Most recently, we brought together Indigenous youth groups to share best practices amongst each other and create a toolkit to share these practices, a step outlined in TRC Call to Action 66. We are currently working on the next phase of our work by bringing together Indigenous youth groups to discuss how we can move forward together to put pressure on the federal government to finally implement this important call to action. Despite the recommendations put forth by the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples, the National Inquiry and Action Plan on MMIGW2S LGBTQIA+, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, and the TRC, many, if not most, urgent steps to restoring the inherent rights of Indigenous peoples and addressing the impacts of residential schools, day schools, and other actions of colonizations have not been taken. The consultation phase is complete. We now need action. The spirit of residential schools has not ended. It is simply transformed into different policies and programs that threaten the ability of Indigenous youth to achieve not only their greatest dreams, but to survive as equals. The descendants of survivors, today's youth, live the highest rates of institutionalization, ranging from the child welfare system to incarceration. Without critical investments into the interrelated factors that serve the well-being of Indigenous youth, youth groups like A7G will continue to sacrifice themselves to protect Indigenous youth, a cycle that has perpetuated for generations. We as community, survivors, and descendants have accepted the burden of reconciliation. We need the government and Canadians to do their part by investing in the healing and wellness, not the institutionalization of children and youth today. I'm using this opportunity I've been given today to advocate for the multiple grassroots Indigenous youth groups, collectives, and organizations across these lands. To ask for your commitment to help us see the implementation of TRC Call to Action 66 so we can finally see meaningful reconciliation in our lifetime. Miigwech, ai exe.
Thank you, Gabriel. Okay, we'll now open the floor for questions. I've sent her or not.
My question is for you, actually, Chair, and that is when we hear that the Ministry of Crown Indigenous Relations has undermined and basically not followed the spirit of the recommendation of TR 66 when Ms. Fayant and her organization have their funding cut from underneath them. Can we get a ministry official to tell us, to answer that question?
Oh, absolutely. And we can.
I'm recommending that we get the answer to that question because, if that's accurate, which I assume it is, it just shows that someone isn't listening very well and is undermining the good work of this organization. And when youth leaders take these kinds of initiatives and work hard to make a difference, it's really disheartening to hear. So I thank you for bringing that to our attention, and I recognize your passion and your commitment and your emotion. And I'd like to know the answer to those questions, and I think our committee will. So thank you for bringing that to our attention, and I would hope, encourage you to carry on with it because your passion, your emotion is a good energy, and I'm sure you are making a difference despite some of the setbacks that you've faced. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Senator. And it's something we can talk about later as well, too. Senator Brazeau?
Yes, and thank you for being with us today. You mentioned that you had funding back in 2017, but funding got, redirected or aligned somewhere else in 2019. Were you actually provided a detailed response from the department as to why this occurred?
I don't know if it was a detailed response, but we basically were told, you did your job and we're going to take it from here. And that was it. And then an organization got that money that we actually didn't have funding to do any of these programs. Like TRC 66 has never actually been implemented at all. It was just like a consultation phase. And then all that work that we had done just got swept off of from under us, and it was gone. And but I think that people thought we would just give up, but we can't. Like it's not a matter of if we have funding or not. It's that we deserve funding. And right now we're talking to multiple youth groups across the country that are experiencing the exact same thing. And honestly, I knew that was happening, but I didn't realize that it was such a systemic problem. There's youth groups just like A7G all over the country that they're just doing the work because if they don't do the work, then those young people fall between the gaps, they fall between the cracks. And so, we're still here, still trying to push for TRC 66. I think that some people have thought that TRC 66 means micro grants for Indigenous youth, but that's not TRC 66. It doesn't say micro grants anywhere in the call to action. And so these youth groups like A7G, we need multi-year funding. Yeah.
Just in addition, are you actually aware of which organization got the funding, and if so, are they Indigenous, and do they do the exact or similar work that you do?
So I won't name any names just because, it can get real complicated. But they were working on reconciliation, but the biggest difference is that they're a national organization. So they have a much different experience with what it looks like on the ground. We're working with Indigenous youth every single day. And, I think that for TRC 66, it says community-based. And that's a really big part of that call to action. Those groups have to be rooted in the land, in the communities that they work with, because if they're not, they just simply won't understand it or the importance of it.
Thank you. Okay, I have Senator Coyle and then Senator Hartling and Senator Adet.
Thank you very much thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your testimony to us today, and thank you for taking the time. Is obviously your time is very precious, and we appreciate this, because hopefully, with the investment of your time here today, and us listening again to what you have to say, hopefully that can be transformed into some fruitful actions. I mean, as you have said, TRC 66 can mean the difference between life and death. And you've seen that. You've seen that. You see it and you witness it. You live it every day. You also have talked about the insecurity of your organization and others like yours, community-based, grassroots organizations, which are a couple of people just day and night trying to do the right thing. And that issue of burnout and insecurity can be crippling, but I commend you for being able to keep it up. That is a really important distinction that you have just made for us when Senator Brezo asked the question. The importance of community-based, those organizations that are connected to the youth, that they are youth-led, connected to youth in communities across the country. That's what that TRC 66 was about. It's very common. I hate to tell you this. I've worked a lot, in Canada and also in other countries, and getting the government of Canada to recognize that they need to water the flowers, not the weeds, it can be very difficult, because they have a hard time distinguishing between what the flowers are and what the weeds are. And some are very slick and good at currying favor. So I'm very sorry that your organization has fallen into this situation. And as you've said, you're not alone. You've now see that you have peer organizations across Canada that are legitimately doing the kind of work that needs to be done through that are recommended through TRC 66. And so that point of questioning and investigation, Senate of Canada, one of our big jobs is to investigate. So you've brought something important to us. It's important for us to understand, I think, as a committee, as a Senate of Canada, Canada's upper chamber, to understand what is going on with TRC 66, but also with others, and to try and understand the types of organizations that are being embraced and the types of organizations that are being shut out, and why. So thank you for raising that with us today. To me, that's part of the truth that we need to understand in order to move towards the kind of reconciliation that we're all in favor of, but we're a long way from achieving. So thank you for that. I don't have a question really, other than, am I correct in my understanding?
Yeah, definitely. And unfortunately, that was what had happened. And, there's these youth groups that are they're still doing the work though, without any kind of multi-year funding, without any core funding. Some of them don't even have like a place to gather really. Whereas other ones, they've kind of like managed to find little funds here and there to make it work. But, despite what happened, it's like TRC 66 still needs to happen, despite all of that kind of, bumps and hiccups that happened. These young people, they're doing such hard work, and they really deserve to get compensated and have that support and resources that they need.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Hartley.
Thank you, David, and your friends that came with you today. I really appreciate your talking about the trauma and the things that you're going through to stabilize your organization and to bring forward what needs to happen. I worked in nonprofit for many years, and I know this is very difficult, especially for you dealing with people going through trauma and trying to get the work done at the same time. It's totally unacceptable. I appreciate that you're here today to tell us. I guess listening today, and I felt a lot of emotion myself just hearing your stories, and who helps you to debrief after and support you, because this is really, all of you like I can see there's a lot of emotion. Are there people that are there that have your back, that help you, that you can talk to and or listen to?
There's community. But again, more Indigenous people carrying the trauma that we're experiencing on a daily basis. Besides that, it's, if it wasn't for our community and our elders that, just yesterday we had a really beautiful ceremony, and it was an elder that we work with, and they don't even ask for anything in return. They see the hard work that we do, and they're like, yes, I will be there for you, and I'm going to do this ceremony for you. But besides that, we're just like operating off like a hope, and how are Indigenous youth just a hope, when we're always talking about reconciliation. We know that there's funding for reconciliation. And so, yeah, that's how it really feels like.
Well, I appreciate you coming forward and telling us, and, now all of us know, and, don't give up. There's hope. We've got to make this happen somehow. And, but I appreciate your courage, and know that we're here with you. Thank you.
Thank you. We have time for one quick question.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Chair.
A commitment or a comment. You remember the national inquiry. We made sure that one of the call for justice, that we put the family, the women, the people who lost a loved one in the center, so they can participate or co-create or be involved. So I will make sure also here that the people who walks beside life or save life or maintain a life, I think the grassroots organization have a say, have a place, and we walk under this bridge every day, so I see. So I cannot pretend it doesn't exist here also.
Mm-hmm.
The time for this panel is now complete. I wish to thank Gabrielle for being with us today, and we'll now suspend the meeting briefly to switch panels. I would now like to introduce our next witness, Jama Maxey, who was originally from White Bear First Nation in Saskatchewan. Jama will provide opening remarks of up to 10 minutes, followed by a question and answer session with committee members. I will now invite Jama to give his remarks.
Thank you so much for that. So I was asked earlier why I want to be here. I had to think about that. So I was walking down the hallway, and I think I formulated my answer. I want to give Indigenous people in this country hope, and that's my life purpose, is to give people hope. One of my mentors, you guys may know him, his name's Jesse Thistle. He's a famous Canadian author, and I met him at university. He believes in what is called narrative therapy. So I'm going to try and provide some of that for you today. Before I begin, I want to introduce myself. My name is Jama Maxey. I was born in Regina, Saskatchewan. and my reserve is White Bear First Nations. I'm from the Lakota people. I'm also Afro-Indigenous. My cookum, she went to residential schooling. My mom was a foster care, went through foster care, and I grew up my whole entire life in foster care as well. And I have two uncles that went to residential schooling and that died by suicide as a result of being in those schools. So that's kind of how my life journey began, right? I already am kind of against the odds, and so to speak. And so when I was growing up in foster care, I suffered. I definitely did, and I experienced all three forms of abuse: mental, physical, and sexual abuse in the foster care system, and that's kind of tattooed in my brain. And as a result of that, when I aged out of foster care, I struggled mightily with addictions and alcoholism, and I found myself without a roof over my head. And to be here today means a lot. And in 2018, I decided to rediscover my culture and my identity and my spirit. And I got sober and I started to pursue education. And that's where I met Jesse Thistle at York University. And today I have the, as mentioned, privilege to be sitting here. So many children do not have this privilege. And, I don't take it lightly to be able to be up here and to speak what I believe. It's truth and reconciliation. I'm telling you guys my truth. And as was mentioned earlier, reconciliation, the word means, rekindling, so to speak, of a relationship. So if I had a relationship with you, I'm rekindling it. We were once good friends. Something happened. I rekindle. Indigenous people in this country have never had a good relationship with the government. So there is no reconciliation. It's conciliation. It's an amends process. So that's what I believe to be true. And that's why I'm saying that, because I strongly believe that, Canada has a lot of change to do. And my biggest thing I wanted to talk about today was the child welfare reform. As I mentioned earlier, before my first birthday, I was one of those children that were scooped before their first birthday. Before I got any formal relationship with my mother, I was put in foster care, and I was raised in foster care my whole entire life. I didn't have a connection to culture. I didn't have a connection to my land, to my cousins and aunties and uncles that I just am meeting now at 26. I didn't have a sense of identity. I was separated from my siblings, and it impacted me in form of mental health and addictions. And at the young age of 21, I definitely thought about taking my own life many times and not being here anymore because I was just existing. And the child welfare reform, in 2016, they released data that 52% of Indigenous people in Canada, or 52% of the child welfare system is Indigenous people, and yet they only make up 8% of the population in this country. That's horrendous numbers. And it's still impacting people the same way that it did in the residential schooling that we were talking about on the 30th. People are being teared from their homes, from their communities, from their families, from their brothers and sisters and moms. Loss of culture and loss of connection to the land. How I see a child welfare reform is the colonial mandates that were made to take these children. There needs to be a better way of approaching that. As we know, colonialism has impacted Indigenous people, but specifically in a child welfare lens, right? Like, what's a reasonable effort for a child to be taken, or a child to be taken, right? these colonial mandates, these investigations, all these things come from that lens. You know, there is no circles, there is no elders, there is nothing involved in that process. And I told you earlier that I don't really believe in, or I have a different definition of what the day means to me. I would say that another thing that really bothers me is, the way that the education is taught to people from kindergarten to 12, right? I was, again, raised in the child welfare system, and I never was taught about residential schooling my whole entire education system. That's pathetic. I had to learn that on my own. And I brought tears in my eyes when I think about it, because that's my family. And that needs to change. There needs to be concrete curriculum taught to this country. We talk about all types of concepts like the Holocaust, different things in history. What matters is what happens on the 30th is people get to speak their truth. When people speak their truth, we can have better relations. We can repair, make that amends. I just want to close with saying thank you to all you people that are here, that took the time to be here. But I call on other senators that aren't here today to step up. Our voices matter, and that's what matters, is that people are heard. And when I see more representation of youth in hierarchies like this, and more people around the table, and when I see one day, I have a dream that there will be, an Indigenous prime minister in this country, and that's when reconciliation happens. Miigwech.
That gentleman. We'll now begin the question and answer part of the meeting, and I'd like Senator Brazeau to start it off.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for sharing your story and your truth. And I don't have a question, but I just want to say that it's an honor not only to meet you, but all of you today, because I may not know what you've been through in its entirety, but I know a little bit. And you're mentioning that your reason to go on is to provide hope. Well, if I can just give you some free advice, because I'm not all that old either, but use that to fuel you. It's going to help you, and it's not just going to help you, but it's going to help a lot of Indigenous youth all across the country. Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Coyle and then Senator Adet.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Maxey. And I'm so glad you made it. You made it through to this point. And that you've said that you're really focused on reforming the foster care system, through which you have had a lot of suffering. I'm sure it's not easy to even talk about that. This committee and this House, Canada's upper house, the Senate, passed Bill C-92, which has the intention, as you know, of reforming how Canada deals with basically child and family services. And it's something that we studied, listened to a lot of testimony on. I mean, you're raising it here today, and others have touched on it. It's so fundamental to the change that has to come for Indigenous peoples and communities to have jurisdiction over their own, which is, I'm assuming that's the reform you're looking for. Now that was passed 3 years ago now, right? Am I right? Wow, time flies. That law, that act was Bill C-92 was passed 3 years ago now. And we've seen some unevenness in terms of what has moved forward or not, and some fights with different provincial governments or over jurisdiction, etc. I'm curious whether you have some feedback and advice for us, because part of our duty is not just to study bills, improve them, pass them, but it's also to follow up on bills and see, well, okay, that was a great idea. We were all supportive. So now what's actually happened with that intention that became enshrined into law? So if you have anything to say to us in terms of that, we'd welcome your thoughts.
Absolutely. So Bill, that bill, I do a lot of speeches across the province, specifically speaking to that. And jurisdiction of, our own children. It's all we're asking for. And we make rules. We make policies, right? Because what I was trying to say, I sometimes don't articulate it right, but they're colonial mandates that were made like by the government. And those don't stick well when you're putting those mandates into these communities, because that's why they're getting scooped. It's because what looks like poverty to one set of families isn't poverty maybe to an Indigenous family. What looks like dysfunction to a white family may not be the same. So, and then also too, like getting back to how we should be dealing with things, which is in a circle, not just one person in a hierarchy making decisions, people sitting around in the community, family finding programs. The family finding program is one of the best programs that I think that is going to be really beneficial for the child welfare system moving forward for all agencies that get that jurisdiction. And the family finding program is, so say someone like myself is removed from their community. I moved to Toronto, and I get I'm about to be scooped, right? So the family finding program is part of the agency, and they go in and they look for members of that family to keep that person in that community, whether that's an uncle, an aunt, grandma, neighbor, school teacher, it doesn't matter. That way we're reducing that number and we're keeping kids in their community, right? Because in the past, what we have done is not gave reasonable effort to try and do that. We just make the decision. We don't look into the communities, and then they get disconnected. And then the disconnection leads to loss of identity and further economic addiction, all those problems later on in life. So, I hope that helps.
It's just a little. Okay, I just want a little clarification. If I
Go ahead.
just thank you for that. The family finding program, does it exist?
Native Child and Family Services of Toronto has a team of people that dedicate their time, their working hours to that.
In Toronto.
Toronto, yeah.
Okay.
So
it's a model that.
Yeah, it's a model that can be used by people around in Canada.
Thank you very much.
And it's going to make a lot of change in this.
Yeah, I hear you. Okay.
Thank you. And I have Senator Audette and then Senator Cordy.
Merci beaucoup
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
for another part of your life or your story that you share with us. It's a gift, it's a privilege, but it's also a responsibility when we receive your truth. So I will say thank you to all of you. I'm very new, 1 year here. I have few years if Creator is fine and okay with me, 20-something years. How can we make sure that we indigenize or we make it more circle or more okay to make sure that your voice is vibrating here and making sure that we don't forget it?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just having people like we often put a lot of people that can tell you about a lot of theory, right? There's a difference between I have to, there's a lot of people that can tell you about theory, but we don't invite people that have lived experience to tables and stuff like that, because I think those impact more than any education could ever do. Like Jesse had told me, your experience is going to outweigh any degree you ever get in this world. Because I believe I want to get a PhD one day, just like Jesse, but my lived experience matters more than that. So including those people, including elders, including knowledge keepers in talks around circles is vital, because that's how things were done and should be done.
Thank you. And we have time for one more question. Senator Cordy.
Thank you very much. And thank you, since I'm not a member of the committee, but I decided I had to come and hear your voices today. And it's been truly wonderful. And you said earlier that you wanted, your passion and your want is to give Indigenous people hope. And I think hearing these voices today of young people is providing hope for people. And I thank you for that. And I used to be a teacher before I took this job. And when I hear young people sharing their voices to tell their stories, it really resonates with me. And I'm sure it's resonating with people who are listening to us today. You spoke, all three of you spoke about intergenerational trauma. And I just feel like we've spoken about intergenerational trauma for so many years, and I'm old enough to be at least your mother, if not your grandmother. So we've talked about it for so many years, and yet I still hear people say, why are we still talking about it? It happened so long ago, not understanding that the trauma is passed down. And I try to explain it, but my voice is not the same. I've not done it. So how do we get that story out so that people understand that it is intergenerational? It's sort of like the ball and chain that still doesn't ever get let go. And so how do you deal with that when you tell your story?
Yeah, I think that, again, it comes from lived experience, right? Like, if someone teaches from a textbook of what intergenerational trauma is compared to me telling you what I just told you, the truth, pain, actual suffering of what intergenerational trauma looks like. Like I had mentioned, my cookum, my two uncles that passed away. That's real life. That's no textbook. And people listen to that. And Canadians will listen to that, and you can watch a bunch of films, you can do all that stuff, but nothing beats real life experience. So you need to continue to share those real life experiences. I think the average Canadian gets more out of that than reading any textbook or literature on what happened. When you hear someone tell you how jacked up it was to live the life that you did, then there's an impact.
Thank you. With that, the time for this panel is now complete. I wish to thank Gemma Maxey for meeting with us today. We'll now suspend the meeting to allow us to switch panels. I would now like to introduce our next and final witness for today, Tyrone Sauk of some Elsipogtog First Nation in New Brunswick. And Tyrone will provide opening remarks of up to 10 minutes, followed by a question and answer with the committee members. And Tyrone, the floor is yours.
Kwe. Indelawizi Tyrone at Lewe Ilzibuktuk. I'm Tyrone and I'm from Ilzibuktuk. I'm here to share my journey with you guys today. And my story starts at my foundation, my family, friends, and community. With their love and support and guidance, I feel we can overcome anything. At 29 years old, I walk with the scars of a lifetime of living, from suicides to terrible accidents, many ups and downs, doubts and certainties. My scars have this ability to remind me my past was real, and what is real offers knowledge, understanding, and the ultimate forgiveness. From an early age, I developed a passion for hockey. My father was an assistant coach for many years during minor hockey and was loved by every player and parent we crossed paths with. Hockey created a community for us and friendships that will last a lifetime. Our love of the game and brotherhood had made us into a championship team for many years. This was a great life lesson for all of us part of the team and helped us all as individuals get to the next level, to not only in hockey, but in life. I went on to play major junior hockey for the St. John Sea Dogs and became a role model for our community. When you work hard and have fun, anything is possible. I've been fishing lobster and snow crab alongside my father for 10 years. It has been 17 months since our fishing vessel, Tyhawk, capsized 10 miles off the coast of Cape Breton. We lost my father that day and has since shifted the way I look at life. The Creator had other plans for me. A man who did everything for his family, friends, and community, gone in an instant. I will forever be grateful for the teachings and lessons my father taught me during his short 49 years here. I will continue to implement these teachings into my everyday life. Watching someone lead by example is way more powerful and inspiring than being told what to do. When my father passed away, I wanted to do something to honor his legacy. My father loved how golf tournaments brought people together. With the community's support and help from sponsorships, we were able to host our first annual Jumbo Hockey Development Camp, which was completely free for 100 Indigenous and non-Indigenous kids ages 9 to 5 in our community to take part. The instructors of the camp were all local hockey players, coached by my father at some point in their careers. He would be proud for us giving back to the community. Last October, I got the opportunity to coach a Junior B hockey team, teaching a group of young men, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, to become one family and unite as one team has been rewarding. Being active in the community on a weekly basis helped with my healing journey and keeps me motivated to keep learning and to keep teaching. In the journey of education, there's no destination. I figured this out the hard way. For several years, I thought I had it figured out and did not want anything new in my life. But I did not realize the moment you settle down into one place, you stop growing. The Creator has a plan for every single one of us. The moment we get off track, you will be slapped in the face with a new set of teachings to put you back on track. For myself, it was losing my father in a very tragic fishing accident, a boat I was supposed to be on. The Creator had another path for me. I spent many days wondering about the what ifs. This was only bringing me to a darker place. I soon realized something needed to be changed. I enrolled at school to UNB to become a teacher and began taking part in sweat lodge ceremonies in the summer of 2021. This helped me release any negative energy I was holding on to and helped open up my mind and heart. It was hearing the stories and struggles from other community members when I realized I was not alone. My goal as an educator will be to help students unlock the sacred knowledge already living inside them, to open them up to the endless number of connections we have living around us. Rather than chasing things like fame, wealth, and status, I want my students to spend time creating good words, good feelings, good relationships, and good memories. A teacher is not meant to be a mediator between you and the Creator, only meant to help you access the divine wisdom already living within. When you are connected to your inner teacher, everyone becomes a teacher and everything becomes a lesson. As a father of 2 young children, I am beginning to see that we are all sent by Creator to be teachers for one another with our own unique gifts. These gifts are much more powerful if we use them collaboratively, helping the community as a whole. The Indigenous way of life has always been communal. The goal of living this way is to provide the needs of the entire group rather than the desires of individuals. In tribal traditions, cooperation is highly valued. Everyone has a skill and role to share, and no skill is better than the other. I'm Sinogama, all my relations.
We'll now begin the question and answer for the session. We'll start with Senator Hartley.
Your story we talked about this morning, so I got to know you from you're from near where I'm from. Just can you talk about your education program? I believe the education program is a bit different because it's involving some of your own teachings. Can you talk about that and how that might be helpful?
So I'm part of a 4-year program. They call it the Wabanaki BED. So it's a cohort of 32 Indigenous students across the province of New Brunswick. We got a few in Quebec and a few in Nova Scotia as well. So it's tailored for working students, and mostly everyone is working in the school right now. And at the start of the 4 years, we went to Lake Macadavik for a 4-day on-the-land teachings. And we had elders from across the province come teach us how to teach the traditional knowledge. And that's it's got throughout the 4 years, the 4th year includes our internship at the schools. And it's a really great program, and we're going to see a lot of change in our education system from this. I truly believe it.
Well, thank you very much for sharing, and I know we will. And with you there, I'm sure that's going to just make a lot of changes. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to go to Senator not in a minute, but I'm going to ask you a question first, Tyrone.
Okay.
What would it mean for your community and nation to be able to exercise our rights-based fisheries and to do so safely and fully? After 23 years of failing to uphold Marshall, what message would you send to the federal government?
I can speak on behalf of my father on that one because I watched him. He was a fisherman for 25 years, and watching him struggle, he broke down his 2nd year of fishing because his boat broke down, and he had no money for his family to feed us. So he sorry,
just take your time.
He did everything he could to provide for us, and it was his passion for fishing that made him a great fisherman. And it doesn't matter if you're a fisherman for 25 years, for 5 years, there's always a chance of terrible accidents have happening. And that kind of got off track there, but to your question, but he didn't have the rights to his boat. So when he went to the bank to try to get loans, they declined him because on paper he did not own the boat. It was a band-owned license. It was a band-owned boat. So my message would be for us to have a louder voice at the table, because the day before the accident happened, we requested a delay in the season, and one person, and I don't think she had a seat at the table, and I truly believe that we need a louder voice.
For sure. Thank you for that, Tyrone. Okay, Senator Arnott and then Senator Bressel.
Well, thank you, Tyrone, for coming here today and sharing your story. I just make a couple of comments. I've said publicly many times, First Nations people look at the world in a different way than non-Indigenous people do. And there's a lot that non-Indigenous people can learn from the way Indigenous people look at the world. And I sense you're going to be teaching a lot of non-Indigenous people and Indigenous people about exactly those things. I also have a profound respect for professional educators, teachers. Teachers are agents of change. You have a classroom. You're a role model. You shape the future of our community. You're an agent of change. And I know from hearing you, your passion, your commitment, motivation, you will be a tremendous agent for change and a great teacher. Thank you.
Senator Bressel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and once again, thank you for sharing your story. I didn't know your father, but I know he is darn proud of you today. And so am I, and I know my colleagues are as well, because one thing that Indigenous people have, and it's unfortunate, but we are survivors. And unfortunately, there are some who are not as lucky as we are. And so having said that, I would just like to know, and you don't have to answer, it's sort of a personal question, but how were you able to move beyond the trauma and you know, in other words, the death of your father? Because, you know, you yourself, your life could have taken a different path. And so I'm always interested in knowing what kept you going to move forward, and which has led you to be here today.
I have every right to be angry, and anger was only making me feel sick. And I no longer want to carry this anger. So I decided to take matter in my own hands, and I'm the one in charge. I'm the one in charge here. And so is everyone else. And
take your time.
It's my children. I look at my children, and if they see me angry, they're going to be angry. They want to see their father happy. And at the end of the day, it's my children. And that's the cycle will end right here.
Good for you. Miigwech.
Well done.
Yeah. Thank you. And we're going to go to Senator Bovey for a final question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm not a member of this committee, but I'm very moved by what all of you have said. I'm particularly moved by your comments about the land. In the many years of teaching I've had the privilege of doing, when I've asked people the definition of culture, I've learned most from my Indigenous students who have said culture is the land. And you talked in response to Senator Hartling about the beginning of your program on the land. And I want to pick up from where Senator Arnott left off, because I agree that non-Indigenous people have an awful lot to learn from you. Is there a way you can take your teachings of the land and expose them to some of us who don't have that in our blood memory?
I would have to bring you right out to the land.
I'll come. I'll come. I was up in Joe Haven the other day doing just that, so I'll come.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're going to go to Senator Coyle for a quick final question.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sock. You will be a fabulous, well, you already are a fabulous educator. Question, when you, that's this wonderful program you're a part of, is it preparing you to work in the regular school system? I don't know if New Brunswick has, we have Mi'kmaq schools in Nova Scotia. I don't know if you have them in your communities also, Mi'kmaq or Maliseet schools, or are you going to be in the regular school system? And what's the relationship if you do have those schools?
They recommend us to go into a First Nations school, and it's elementary. Yeah, elementary, and we've got an option to take our Cert 5. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, the time for this panel is now complete. I wish to thank Tyrone Sock for meeting with us today. And that brings us to the end of our meeting time. We have a hard stop at 3 o'clock. Well, Alan, thank you all for the 5 Indigenous youth who have joined us today. And I know I speak for all when I say that your testimony was moving and inspiring. And on a personal note, I want to add that I am so appreciative of you and all Indigenous youth who are working tirelessly to make a difference. I know the journey has not been an easy one, yet you have shown tremendous courage and determination. I applaud your efforts and wish you the absolute best in the future. Meeting is now adjourned.